There's a lot of nurses that actually fly into the Bay Area to work from within the States. But then there's also, I know folks who are flying in from the Philippines, from Tanzania, from like all over the world, because they maybe want to give their family the opportunity to live in another country, or they just like the idea of having another home in a less expensive place.
You're listening to Nurses on Fire, the podcast for nurses by nurses aspiring to financial independence. I'm your host, Naseema McElroy of Financially Intentional. Let's spark some flames, y'all.
Welcome to episode 17 of the Nurses on Fire podcast.
And if this is your first time listening, thank you so much for tuning in. I would be eternally grateful if you took a moment to subscribe, leave a review, and share with other nurses that you know could benefit. And when you post that review, make sure you take a screenshot and send it to Naseema at financiallyintentional.com. Better yet, screenshot your favorite episode and share it on socials and tag Nurses on Fire podcast. Now, you guys, I have some super exciting news to share. This week, I was featured on Forbes. You guys, my story of how I paid off $1 million in debt was featured in Forbes, and I could not have been more honored. What's even better is that you guys showed me so much love. Thank you for my friends, my family, my followers, everybody in the community that reposted, that screenshot, that replied, that bigged me up, or just sent a whole bunch of love my way. You are appreciated. Now, I am super excited to get into this podcast episode because it is the first of 3 in a series where I talk to people who have lived abroad in some capacity on their path to financial independence. On this first episode of the series, I am joined by Vicki Van Essen. Now, Vicki is an RN and midwife who is CoastFi and has been slow traveling the world with her husband and 2 sons. While on maternity leave with her second son, she discovered the concept of FI. The FI community exposed her to a whole world of people who are thinking outside of the box and living unconventionally. Vicki shares her story on how she makes it work while working as a nurse in the San Francisco Bay Area, living abroad, home and world schooling her kids, travel hacking, and slow traveling throughout the world. Without further ado,
Episode 17, This Nurse is CoastFi.
Hi, Vicki. Welcome to the Nurses on Fire podcast. I'm super excited to get you on the podcast because when I decided to create this podcast, you were top of mind. So welcome, Vicki. Tell all the people a little bit about yourself, and we'll talk about your unique journey on the path to financial independence.
So, hey, Naseema. So I guess for the purposes of this podcast, I'm a nurse. I work as a psychiatric nurse, and then I'm also a women's health nurse practitioner and a certified nurse midwife. Let's see, do you want, like, how far back do you want me to go?
Let's talk about why you got into nursing. Like, let's talk about your nursing path a little bit, and then we can talk about what kind of got you started in wanting to pursue financial independence.
Yeah, so the nursing path, that all began when I was in college, I took a lot of anthropology classes, and they were anthropology of health and illness, anthropology of reproduction, things like that looked more at culture and how culture affects and defines health and illness. And as a result of that, I did a lot of research abroad. So I spent some time in Morocco doing research while I was studying abroad. And then again, I had a federal grant to do more public health research in Morocco after I graduated. And having done, public health research, I was like, it really helps to also have some sort of clinical background. I knew I was really interested in women's health, and that's what my research had been on, always like obstetric related women's health research. And looked at my options there and realized that nurse midwifery was really the focus that I was most interested in, and the sort of final degree that I wanted in terms of clinical skills. And so moving back from there, I was like, okay, so in the United States, in order to be a nurse midwife, you have to be a registered nurse first. And I already had a bachelor's degree. So I looked at a lot of these different programs that are available for folks who already have a bachelor's degree to get their RN in a year and then go ahead and move on into their master's training. So like you, I ended up at UCSF and did my 1-year RN training and then went back to become a nurse midwife and a women's health NP.
Yes, the University of California at San Francisco is where we both ended up attending nursing school around the same time, right? So I think that's super cool that your desire to pursue nursing, all these kind of now I can't say the word, anthropological reasons, because, oh my God, just like, I think what people forget is that nursing, or not forget, but what's lost in practice a lot is the holistic focus on nursing, and how just as, our nursing practice is set up, it's to incorporate the whole person, the whole being in our care delivery, and really having a good understanding of the people's backgrounds and how we're all different but the same.
Right. And how your culture can really affect the way you understand your body and what we consider health or illness.
Especially around childbirth, because there's so many beliefs and practices and just ways that people approach and come into the situation, that cultural competence is key. But what's lost in the ways that we try to oversimplify healthcare in the sake of trying to provide quote unquote quality care has kind of watered down a lot of the ways that we're able to treat people in practice. So I think that that's fantastic that that's your background and that's how you came into it. But what's also very interesting, Vicki, is that you actually aren't even practicing as a midwife right now, kind of similar to me. We did pursue those terminal degrees. We did get our master's in nursing, but we're actually both still practicing as floor nurses. Can you talk a little bit about that decision?
Yeah, so one of the opportunities I had after my 1-year RN training was to go ahead and take a year off to work as a registered nurse. And I ended up taking a job as a psychiatric nurse because I actually really enjoyed my psychiatric rotation as well. And I figured I would just do that for the year and then probably like part-time during my master's training. But it turned out that I ended up keeping that job and working per diem sort of on and off just since then. So since 2007, I've had that job and worked more or less as my schedule allowed because it's a per diem position. But in between, a year after I graduated from the master's program, I did get a job as a nurse midwife. So I did work for about 5 years in the Central Valley as a nurse midwife and really, really loved my work as a midwife. But the truth is that being a registered nurse and working under that license allows a lot more flexibility. And in particular, the job that I have as a per diem nurse just allows me to really set my own schedule, work more or less as much or as little as I'd like. And for my purposes right now, that just makes more sense.
Yes. And also, don't forget to mention that you work in the San Francisco Bay Area like I do, and the salary difference between what a staff nurse would make in a hospital versus what midwife would make in the Central Valley is drastically different. So in your goals to pursue financial independence, it makes more sense for you to be able to maximize your income and have a lot of work flexibility. So let's talk and let's transition into talking about your path to financial independence. What made you interested in financial independence? Have you always been like a frugal kind of person? Have you always just been good with money? Or what happened to kind of shift your focus on this path of retiring early and then ultimately making your work flexible so that you're able to travel the world with your family?
So I do think that just the way I was raised, my family was always pretty frugal, and that sort of instilled that mindset in me, the focus on saving and learning more about managing money, all of that. It's not something I learned as a child from my family, but they planted that seed of wanting to be financially responsible and understand how all of that worked. So I think I was always pretty frugal and always a saver, but I didn't really understand the ins and outs of like investing on the level that most people in the financial independence community are doing. But after I had my second child, I was at a point where I was like, I can't be working as hard as I'm working right now. At that point, I was working my full-time job as a midwife, and then I was also spending 1 or 2 weekends a month working as a psychiatric nurse, and I was just working all the time. And as you know, like the pay is good and the money is nice, but at some point you have to realize that there has to be more of a plan. There has to be like a bigger picture. It's not just about like saving lots of money. And my hope had been that I would have that second baby and suddenly I'd have some sort of epiphany about what I wanted to do and that everything would change. And, I would have some make some moves in my life. But the truth is I had the baby and then my maternity leave ended and I went back to work and it was just the same. But during that time, that sort of forced me to start thinking about what I really wanted to do. And that's about the time that I really started deep diving into a lot of these financial independence and just like personal finance podcasts. That's also roughly the time when like CoastFi started recording. And so that's when I was really introduced to the concept of financial independence and retiring early. Because prior to that, I just, most of what was available was just sort of looking at retirement way out, when you're 65. And I knew that I couldn't possibly work as hard as I was working until I'm that old.
What's funny is that you think that you have this time when you're pregnant, you think like you're going to come out of it like this different person. You're like, at least with my maternity leave, like I'll have some time to think, and then hit you and you don't do anything. There's like these months that go by and you're like, oh, guess what? Like I was like actually like living life. And then like I didn't have time to meet all these demanding goals.
The amazing thing, I can thank my son for all those walks that I took with him. I'd be plugged into my podcast. So I have so many memories of walking around the neighborhood, listening to all these financial podcasts and being making, my wheels started turning. And the same thing actually goes for all the weekends that I was driving back from Fresno to San Francisco to work. My wheels were turning because I was listening, for 3 to 4 hours at a time to all these podcasts. And it was like trying to apply them to my life. And that's, I think, really what inspired me. But then I also, while I was on my maternity leave, had the opportunity to go to Germany for a month where I have family there. And, when you're working your regular full-time job, you don't get more than maybe 2 or 3 weeks of vacation. So I never really had the option to go off, to go travel abroad for an extended period of time. So during the maternity leave, I was like, I'm taking up this opportunity to go and spend a whole month there. And while we were there, so with my older son and my husband and our baby, we were all there together. And we just realized we really enjoyed sort of that European pace of life, a little more of a focus on family. It was a beautiful location. And so that actually was part of the inspiration. So we were like, well, we'd really love to come back to Europe and we'd really like to live abroad. And that kind of happened at the same time that I started reading and listening to more of these podcasts. And so together kind of created this turn for me.
Wow, that is so cool. I just see that that freedom and I'm just like, oh my God, I want that. And I understand that just being able to travel the world and explore and have that time with your family, a lot of times, what's funny, actually, it just ties into something like I was in an Uber yesterday picking up my car, and the Uber driver said he was from Peru. His wife is from the Philippines. And I was just talking about how I wanted to travel the world with my kids. And he was just like, well, how many weeks off does your job give you? And I just started laughing because at first that used to be a consideration, but I'm just like, my world doesn't work like that. If I wanted to take off, I'll just take a per diem or, take a leave of absence. Like, I'll just leave. But, and I had to laugh because I was like, you know what, that's a total mindset shift, because a lot of Americans are living their life like, I only have 2 weeks of vacation a year, and most people don't even maximize that. But I'm just like, listen, my vacation is limitless. I just have to make sure I'm setting myself up in a financial place so that I can leave. But it's totally possible. And so I think that that's the power of just being part of the movement of financial independence. Even if you're not in a position of retiring early, you now know what levers you can pull in order to take those, so quote unquote, mini retirements, or to just shift your life so that it's by design. And so we're not stuck in this like rat race that, can, especially for nurses, especially psych nurses, oh my God, can cause some major burnout. So fast forward now, Vicki, your family is actually living in Portugal and you work still in San Francisco. Can you walk us through that having that second baby and learning, and then what steps you took to be able to now live abroad with your family, but being able to maximize on your Bay Area salary?
Yeah. So I starting back at where I was kind of learning about being able to travel and financial independence and all of that. That's where I was introduced to the world schoolers. And that's like, there are tons of families that consider themselves world schoolers. They're traveling the world and educating their children on the road. Their children are learning from their experiences in other countries. And this whole group of people are, they have books, they have websites, but a lot of these folks are interacting on Facebook groups. So there's a Facebook group for world schoolers. There's a Facebook group called We Are World Schoolers. And then there's a lot of family travel Facebook groups as well. And then diving into some of those groups that have, up to 50,000 members really gave me an opportunity to see that there were a lot of people doing this traveling thing with their families, even though people will often tell you, now that you have a child, you can't travel anymore. Now that your children are in school, you can't take long vacations anymore or whatever. Like those things, that's not actually true, right? Again, it's like, give yourself permission to think a little bit outside the box. And if that's really what you want to do, there are ways to do that. So back to world schoolers, this really gave me, reading through all of these posts helped me see how it was possible to make that happen, whether it was, regarding health insurance or homeschooling or how to make money. All of these things are discussed endlessly. And so that was a super inspiration for me. We realized that we thought we just wanted to go ahead and live in Germany, but we realized that would be a little bit restrictive in terms of traveling. So we decided we would spend at least a year traveling. And my son would have been in first grade back in the States. So I decided to homeschool him for first grade. And intermittently, so about every 6 weeks or so, I was flying back to the Bay Area for work because of the way policies and procedures around scheduling my shifts. I had to be back about every 6 weeks to work a certain number of shifts. And that actually worked out pretty well because San Francisco has a huge airport and it's easy to fly in from, major cities in Europe. So I just try to kind of schedule our travel to coincide with being in a major city so that I could fly back for work.
What kind of things did you do to financially prepare to take that leap?
Yeah, this is not something that I just did from one day to the next. We basically spent probably about 2 years scheming, planning, dreaming, trying to kind of work it all out because there were so many aspects to this that I was like, I don't know, how would taxes work and how would healthcare work and how would all of it. It's just all of it required so much research and planning. And a lot of it was pretty overwhelming and a little bit scary. But again, it's just one thing at a time. I just kind of did all of my research. And over the course of those 2 years, just figured out solutions to all the potential, problems that could come up. But what was your question again?
Kind of like, what did you do to bring the boat closer to the dock? Like with your finances, did you build emergency funds?
Right. In terms of my finances. Yeah. So I definitely wanted, I wanted a full year emergency fund. So I made a point of saving that, in sort of like liquid bank accounts. And then in addition, so about 2 years, so I spent all of that time just stocking away cash and just putting a lot of money into our retirement accounts and things like that, because I wanted to have enough saved in all of my retirement accounts that I wouldn't feel like I still needed to contribute to them once we left, because I didn't know exactly how my income would be. So I was like, if I don't even contribute another dollar, I want this to be like enough that I could retire at a normal retirement age. And it turned out that now that we've been traveling, I've still been able to contribute to my retirement accounts, but that sort of took the pressure off.
Dang, that's like really, really good that you're still able to do that. Because I think like a lot of, you think, okay, like you're going to transition into this mode. Well, now you're just living off of savings and it may delay your overall retirement goal, but you're still living life. And so it's worth it. I love it. So where exactly are you at right now on your path to financial independence?
Oh, I guess I don't even know what it would be called, but we're like beyond, I don't know, maybe like 3/4 of the way there. So not like, I'm definitely not financially independent, but enough that I feel like pretty solid ground, especially knowing that I am still earning income. I'm actually not living off of my savings, and I am still contributing to my accounts, so I feel like it's like a pretty safe place to be. And now that the truth of the matter is that the entire time that we were traveling, our expenses were actually pretty low. They were actually lower than I thought they would be, and they were definitely way lower than living in California. So I think that's part of why I can continue to save, is that my cost of living is so low.
I think that that's great, because I think we often get caught up on trying to achieve this number and then forget that it's more about the journey that we're on. And it seems like, Vicki, to me, it sounds like you're living your best life right now. And like, as long as you're still on the path, even if you were kind of like at a place where you couldn't contribute and you were just letting your investments grow on the back end while living off of your savings and your salary, you would be in a good place. But you're still in a place of growth, which I think is phenomenal. And how long do you think you're going to continue working in the Bay Area while exploring the world with your family?
I mean, right now I don't have any plans to stop. So I don't know how long I'll be doing that. I mean, I'm always looking at other things, like a lot of remote type of jobs that you can do. Nowadays, there's a lot of options, especially for nurse practitioners, to work online in various capacities, stuff like that. So I'm always looking at other things too. But the truth is, like, this has worked well for me for the last more than a year. So I don't mind going back. I actually really enjoy going back and seeing my friends and my community in the Bay Area. So for the time being, it's fine. And we'll see what comes.
So let's transition into talking about if there are people out there just like me that are so jelly about what you get to do and think it's so fantastic. How can a nurse transition into living abroad and make that work, whether it's living abroad and working abroad or living abroad and working domestically? Can you talk us through some steps that we can take if that's what we aspire to do?
Sure. So as a nurse, I actually know quite a few nurses in the Bay Area and in the rest of the country who create these schedules that allow them to fly in from elsewhere, whether that's from within the United States. There's a lot of nurses that actually fly into the Bay Area to work from within the States. But then there's also, I know folks who are flying in from the Philippines, from Tanzania, from like all over the world, because they maybe want to give their family the opportunity to live in another country, or they just like the idea of having another home in a less expensive place. But as long as you have a flexible job that allows you to, set your own schedule, these kinds of things are possible. And the nurses that I know that are doing this are either working per diem, or, if you're a nurse practitioner or a midwife, maybe you can get a locum position where you can just kind of fly in for a set amount of time and then leave again. In terms of working abroad, I don't know any American nurses working abroad. I'm sure there are nurses working abroad. I know there are certain countries like maybe the UK, Australia, where it's possible, I think, to work on an American license or relatively easy to somehow transfer that. But again, as you mentioned, the wages in the Bay Area are probably some of the highest in the world. So under many conditions, it actually makes more sense to fly back and work than it does to work in other countries. Oh, the other option that you do have as an American nurse if you want to work abroad is through USA Gov, I think, usajobs.gov, I think. That's the federal jobs. And so you can work as a nurse on various international bases. So in Germany, there's a couple of bases that'll hire RNs or NPs. And then I'm sure there's some in maybe Japan, Italy, things like that.
I am going to talk to some people that work for the State Department that are going to go into detail about nursing jobs abroad, specifically in the State Department, but other opportunities for nurses to work abroad. And hopefully on future podcast episodes, I will bring on a nurse that actually does work abroad. So that's not something we have to spend a lot of time on this episode, but you did say something that can be really scary to some people. And we have these golden handcuffs as nurses. Our benefits can be really good, especially like health insurance and all that kind of stuff. And you talked about being per diem. Let's talk a little bit about how you navigate that part of not having the security of those good old nurse benefits while your family is living abroad.
Yeah. So I actually never really had those benefits, as I know the nurses, especially for city and county in San Francisco, they have very nice benefits and I hear about them a lot, but I've always worked per diem. So I actually never had access to any of those benefits. And truthfully, I'm the type of person that actually prefers having freedom of schedule over any of those benefits. And so I just kind of purchase what I need as I go, especially with regards to health insurance. So for instance, while we were traveling, I purchased insurance on the market. Like in California, it's called the Covered California. You can purchase insurance there just so that I had something covering me whenever I was coming back to the States to work, just in case I needed it. But also because while we were abroad, we did have travel insurance that covered emergencies, and that was pretty affordable compared to US insurance. But one of the requirements when you have travel insurance is that you have insurance in your home country so that, God forbid something happens, they fly you back home, you need to be able to continue your care there. So we all had insurance back in the States while we were traveling in addition to our travel insurance.
So you have to have travel insurance plus some kind of minimum health insurance here, or is that part of your travel insurance?
No, the travel insurance assumes that you're a normal person who has a home back in the country where you came from that you would want to return to if you had a health crisis, whereas we didn't really. We had dissolved everything. We had sold our house, sold our cars, sold all of our stuff, and we didn't technically have a home in California. So I had a really good friend whose address I was using, and I was basically like, hey, is it okay? If something really bad happened, we'd probably be coming back to your house. And she was like, let's hope that doesn't happen. But I guess that would be okay, So we just based our insurance off of her address because her address was our permanent address in the US.
So that's cool. But that sounds really cost prohibitive. Can you talk about the cost of having dual insurance?
Well, so in the US, I just used the sort of the bronze plan Kaiser insurance in California, and it's a little pricey, but it was not terrible. And then the kids, because our income was low enough in California, I think they would have actually qualified for Medi-Cal. So I was like, well, God forbid we had to come back. Medi-Cal, you can apply anytime during the year. So I was like, we can always just apply if we really needed to when we came back. And we didn't fortunately have to do that. So really, we were just buying insurance for my husband and myself. And then travel insurance, there's a lot of different types of plans out there. I feel like we probably paid somewhere between maybe 2 to 3,000 for the year, which again, by American standards for the whole family, that was not that much.
No, that's super
If
cheap.
you average it out. Yeah, it's super cheap. And it's like, it just, because in my mind, I was like, okay, I just want this in case, like, I have 2 little boys, like broken bones, things like that. We only had one case where we actually had to use it when my 3-year-old had to get stitches in Spain. But that's exactly sort of what I had it for, was that. I mean, honestly, I could have just paid for the stitches myself, but sort of like accidents, sudden illnesses, things like that.
Yeah. So let's just talk about logistics of you being able to travel back and forth. So you just typically come out here on your own and your family stays wherever you are staying in the world. So your husband takes care of them, right? So does your husband also work?
Yeah, he does he works remotely on the computer he's done a couple of different things. He's taught Arabic online, and then he does a lot of like building websites for small businesses, updating their websites, things like that, which really allows him to sort of work more or less as time allows. So when I'm around, he tends to take on more jobs. And then if I'm gone, he's usually tries to make sure he's not working because, being the single parent with 2 young kids is like a full-time job for sure.
For sure.
Yeah. So he's, I'm definitely the primary breadwinner, and then he's doing some of that on the side. Now that we have our older child in school and probably our younger one's going to be going to preschool soon, we'll both have more time on our hands. So that might be expanding soon. But especially while we were traveling, he was just kind of, it was more flexible.
Yeah, I love that you guys both have income sources so that they work around your lifestyle instead of the other way around, like so many people do. I'm known as a debt slayer because of the $200,000 in student loans I slayed in 2.5 years. I hated those loans and dealing with the loan servicers. I was head down and focused and wanted to get rid of the debt as soon as possible. Knocking out these loans and seeing a 0 loan balance was one of the most liberating feelings I have ever felt. But recently I learned that by not optimizing my student loan payoff strategy, I lost money. I'm talking about big money, y'all. I could have saved $80,000 if I had a customized student loan plan by the team at Student Loan Planner. Please don't make the same mistake as me. If you have student loan debt, especially in the 6 figures, head over to studentloanplanner.com/financially intentional to get your customized student loan plan today. Do you know how your retirement funds are invested? Do you know how much you're paying in fees? Chances are you're on the same boat as some of my coworkers. Some of them set up their retirement when they first got hired and never looked at it again. Some have let a computer select their investments and don't even know what they're invested in. Worst of all, some people have their retirement funds sitting in a savings account and they're not even invested in the market because they're afraid to lose money. That's hella scary, y'all. What's even scarier is that some of you listening don't even have a clue what I'm talking about. And guess what? This is super common. This has to change today. Let Bloom do the work for you. Head over to financiallyintentional.com/Bloom and get your free retirement account analysis. They'll check and see if your retirement account is optimized for you, and they'll let you know if you're paying too much in fees. That's Bloom with 3 O's. Bloom can also manage your retirement account on an ongoing basis so you can take the stress out of retirement planning. If you choose to work with Bloom, their fees are incredibly low, less than your Netflix subscription. You have enough to worry about. Let Bloom handle your retirement account. The hardest thing you'll have to do when it comes to your retirement is remember that Bloom is spelled with 3 O's. Head over to financiallyintentional.com/Bloom. Remember, spelled with 3 O's, and get your retirement account squared away today. The other thing that can be kind of cost prohibitive is you're traveling from, like right now, you're traveling from Portugal to San Francisco to work. How can you afford to do that?
So the amazing thing is, honestly, the entire last year, flights have not been that expensive. And obviously that can change, but flights from Europe to San Francisco and back for me have ranged somewhere between like $250 round trip to like $1,000 round trip. So overall, not terribly expensive. And then I've gotten into, as part of the like financial independence retire early community, there's definitely a focus on travel hacking and using credit card points and miles and things like that to defray the cost of travel. And in those 2 years when we were kind of planning to do this travel thing, we were also building up a lot of these points. So I had enough points to actually cover all of my flights for the first year. And I continue to, build up a certain number of points. So I continue to have this sort of, bank of points that I can pull from. So I don't usually purchase most of my flights. I don't purchase myself. I use those points, especially flights like I'm flying back around Christmas time, or if I fly in the summer when they're expensive, those flights I'll just use points for. But then sometimes I'll be super cheap flights. Like in February, my flight was less than $300. So I just buy those myself.
That is super cool. But for people who are new to the term travel hacking, can you just spend just a little bit of time explaining how that works?
It's actually like you could do a full like master's degree on travel hacking, because it just seems like it can get very complicated. But the bottom line is that especially a lot of credit cards will have points and or miles that you can earn either by opening credit cards and then spending a minimum amount on that card, or then by using that card to make purchases. So what a lot of people end up doing is opening a credit card maybe every 2 months, every 3 months, spending up to that minimum amount, and then getting a certain number of, like a large number, maybe 50,000, 100,000 points or whatever, that they can then use for travel. So certain types of points, like Chase has these points called ultimate reward points. They're very, very flexible. You can use them on, Chase has a portal where you can purchase travel stuff, but it's really Expedia. So it's like you can buy hotel rooms or flights or rent cars, and you can do all of that just using their points. You could also transfer those points to other airlines like United or I don't know. They have a bunch of different partners. You can transfer to hotels such as Hyatt. And then when you transfer those points, then you can book with those airlines or those hotels directly. And then there's all these strategies about using the points to maximize how many flights or how many hotel rooms you can get. There's a lot of people that are really into flying first class all around the world with points. But since I fly so much, I just try to maximize the amount of flights I can get with my points. I just fly economy, and I've gotten pretty good at sleeping in the back.
But also, you do have cards that have lounge benefits, which is really nice too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. So for sure, for someone like me who travels a lot, the Chase Sapphire Reserve is an awesome card. And that's one of the ones that gives you the lounge, the priority pass. So the priority pass allows you to visit all kinds of lounges throughout the world. Different airports will have, usually they have a bunch of different lounges, and priority pass will maybe give you access to 2 or 3 of them. And that's been amazing because it means that, when you go to these lounges, it's a comfortable place to rest. They usually have drinks and they have food. And like the one I went to in Barcelona recently has a shower too. And I basically actually went to the airport after working a shift. So I didn't even get to shower before my flight. So by the time I arrived, I was like, I really want a shower. And that was an awesome thing to be able to do in that lounge. And then in addition to the priority pass, they actually also will pay for your global entry, which is programmed by the federal government, where they basically check you out ahead of time to make sure that there's nothing about you that they should be worried about. And then it allows you to bypass immigration when you re-enter the country. So you don't have to get in that really long passport line to try to get back into the United States. Instead, you're able to fast track through this really short line to get back into the country. So for me, that's great. I can usually land in San Francisco and get through those lines in 20 minutes maybe and be out the door.
That's awesome. It's like you figured everything out, Vicki. But I love it. So you figured it out. Yeah, you
The
figured
longer
it
you
out
do
so that the next nurse doesn't
yeah.
have to figure it out, right? So let's talk about you and your family actually living abroad, and let's talk about like how you pick where you're going to live. And then you have two young boys. Like, how do you navigate their education while you're abroad?
Yeah, so part of the reason we wanted to go abroad in the first place was, as I mentioned, I have family in Germany and I actually speak German with my children. So, and then in addition to that, my husband has family in Morocco and he speaks Arabic with the children. So we have sort of a trilingual family going on here. And being in California, that was a hard thing to keep up because English is so dominant and it's hard to have any input from any German speakers or definitely no Moroccan Arabic speakers around in Fresno. So we were like, okay, we really would like to go back to Germany and Morocco more often, not only to see family and then also to immerse the kids in these languages that they've been learning from us. So that was like one of our major priorities. So when we first left, we went ahead and spent 3 months in Germany and Austria, and then followed that up with 3 months in Morocco. The other benefit for us that had was that my husband has an American passport, while the kids and I have American and EU passports because we have German citizenship as well. So the kids and I could have stayed in Europe indefinitely, but my husband, as a tourist, would have to leave after 90 days and then stay out of Europe for 90 days. That's a rule that region is called the Schengen region within Europe. And you're only allowed to be in for 90 days, and then you have to leave for 90 before you can re-enter again. So when we were in Germany and Austria, that was 90 days. And then we went to Morocco for 90 days so that we were out for 90. And then we re-entered to Portugal and Spain. And so we spent 90 days in Portugal and Spain. And so, like I said, the Germany part was because we wanted to see family and practice some German. And then we went to Morocco to see Eunice's family and to have the kids immersed in Arabic. And then we were just curious about Portugal because we'd heard so many great things about it. That's why we came to Portugal initially, and then spent 2 more months in Spain because we had friends there that we wanted to visit. So that was the thinking behind the first sort of 9 months of our trip. And then after that, we ended up going to Croatia. We spent 3 months in Croatia because, again, that's outside of the Schengen zone because we'd spent 90 days in Spain and Portugal, and that's part of the Schengen European area. So we left that, went to Croatia for 90 days, and then actually ended up traveling south from there through Montenegro and Albania, which ended up being a really beautiful country as well. We really loved Albania, and we spent about a month there.
Yeah, man, this is so cool. As you're talking, I'm just imagining all these places in my head because, of course, I've seen your pictures, but I'm just like, this has been my dream. Actually, when I decided to become a nurse, well, a little bit of background about me. I was first in healthcare administration, and I found it very restrictive, and I did not like the bureaucracy of working for healthcare administration in the healthcare administrative structure. That hierarchy kind of was not a good fit for me. And then I was just like, I looked at these nurses and I saw them coming in and out. You know, these are nurses that I used to manage. And I was just like, man, I want that life. And so when I decided to go back to nursing school, after I already had a master's in healthcare administration, my goal was really to be able to travel the world as a nurse. And that was my ticket to see the world. But of course, I went to UCSF and then, you know, got my nursing job just like you out of nursing school and was making a really good income. And then kind of life got caught up with me. And then I never really got to enjoy the benefit of traveling the world as a nurse. And then I had kids and then I was like, okay, well, you know, I need to get a little set. And then I got my, you know, financial independence kind of journey. And that had me working, you know, kind of stuck here in this job, making sure I secured my high income while I was paying off my massive debt. But I always dreamed, especially after having my first daughter, of being able to educate my kids and expose my kids to the world and different cultures. And so just hearing what your kids are able, first of all, it's amazing that your kids are trilingual. I mean, like in California, but to be able to practice those languages and see those cultures like firsthand is phenomenal. I feel like you open your child's mind up to so much by exposing them to the world. You can never teach in any kind of school here. And just that experience is something that I've always coveted and something that I've wanted for my family. And so, oh my God, it just brings chills to hear how much your kids have been exposed to and how blessed they are to have two such phenomenal parents.
And yeah, they have no idea. For them, it's just normal. They're just like, where are we going today? Are we taking a bus or a train? Like, it's really just like, and they have no idea. I'm like, someday you'll look back and you'll be like, wow, you did some crazy stuff. Like, nobody does that, But right now, it's just, for them, home is wherever we are, wherever we are together, that is our home. And like, I think, they know that they can rely on us. And so they have that sense of stability. And even though we're always moving around, I don't think they're feeling like, like they're, they still feel anchored to us, to the family.
And that's so cool. And I just hope to normalize that for my kids as well. So that's goals for me, to normalize world-class travel, education, and just knowing the opportunities that's available to them across the world. And of course, they're too young to realize it, but what you're setting them up for is just a phenomenal life. And so I love it.
I should probably expand a little bit on the education part of it too. So that's the other part that's obviously you have to think about if you have kids, if you're going to travel, and if they're of a certain age, they're probably going to require something in the form of education or keeping them up to speed. But the beauty of this day and age is that everything is online. So there's a lot of resources that are available, including you could just buy a curriculum and carry it with you. You can buy books and carry them with you. But honestly, when you're traveling, you don't want to carry a bunch of books. So there's a ton of stuff that's just available online. There's full curricula that you can follow online. You can even, for instance, there's one called Time for Learning. It's just a curriculum, basically. I think it's, you can kind of take some tests when you first start and see where your kid is supposed to be at, or you can just start at the grade level that they're supposed to be in, or if you know that they're ahead of grade level or whatever, you can just jump them ahead. And it just allows you to kind of move along at their speed, but also know where they're supposed to be roughly, like if they were in that grade back in the States. So for me, that was really reassuring because I'm not a teacher and I don't have any background in education. And I honestly never even thought of homeschooling my kids. It was just kind of a conclusion that I came to, knowing that this is what we wanted to do as a family and that this is how we were going to have to educate my older son while we were on the road. But doing so, and again, through a lot of these internet, Facebook groups and whatnot, there's so many resources available to help your kids just learn and also to take advantage of all the things that you're seeing as you travel. So for instance, we take a visit to a Roman Colosseum or to some, go to the beach and look at all the animals and the plants and whatnot that are around, and then go and read about them when you're back home, or do read about the Romans, read about, how they used to fight the gladiators and whatnot in their Colosseum, stuff like that. I feel like it made it interesting for our child, but it also was an opportunity for him to learn history and biology and whatnot.
I love it. All the different forms of learning. You actually get to teach about the Roman Empire by, walking through Rome. And it's just, God, it's awesome. But it just stimulates kids on so many different levels, where it's not just drawing, you're learning out of a history book. It's not just drawing, you're learning about these concepts, but you are actually exploring them with your children. And so the way that they learn is totally impacted by that. And it's so great. I love it all. But did you mention that your oldest son was actually in school right now?
Yeah. So now we decided to stay in Portugal for a while. So we've enrolled him in school here. And so now he's learning Portuguese.
Wow. That's cool. That's cool. How long do you plan on staying in Portugal?
I don't know. I think right now we actually really like it. So I don't know if we're in like the honeymoon phase. So I'm just, but for the time being, we really like it. And I mean, we're kind of settling in and seeing what life is like here. And if we like it, maybe we'll stay longer.
And so there's not those kind of visa rules that so your husband is a Moroccan citizen?
He was, but then he came to the US and we got married. And so now he's an American citizen.
Okay. But you were saying that he, like, those little zones that he can't.
So if you decide that you want to reside somewhere, then you can like apply for residency. And then, so as a spouse of an EU citizen, you can reside with your family in the EU. It's just more paperwork. It's paperwork, bureaucracy that you kind of have to deal with.
You don't have that kind of bureaucracy in Portugal, right?
We do. I mean, you do, but it's like a lot better than if you were, say, just coming on an American. So if you're an American and you want to come and live here, you have to apply for a visa in advance, through your consulate in the US. And you have to have that visa in your passport when you come. And you have to give you have to show all this proof and stuff that you can support yourself and whatnot. But if you're a family member of somebody from the EU, then you can really just show up and then you just register that you're here. It is some paperwork and some bureaucracy, but a lot less than you'd have if you were coming as an American citizen without family connections.
Can you just talk a little bit about navigating, living internationally when your husband has a little bit of a different background than you, I should say? How is that?
Wait, you mean in terms of work?
No. I'm talking about like any things that you've experienced, like as far as traveling abroad when your husband is Moroccan.
Gotcha.
Race-wise.
Yeah, that's always something that you want to take into consideration, just making sure that your entire family is comfortable wherever you're going. And I think some countries are definitely more pleasant to be in if you're a person of color than others. But for the most part, we didn't go anywhere. If I knew that there was somewhere that any of us would be really uncomfortable, then like that place was not on our list. So everywhere we went we knew we would probably be comfortable and safe. But at the same time, there were definitely places where we would get like a lot of stares where people were obviously staring at us to the point that even our kids were like, wow, why are they staring at you? And that didn't happen so much in the US, so that was something new for our kids. But because basically we're mixed race, so in some places that's a mixed race couple. So in some places that's very unusual. And in some places like Albania, for instance, their borders have only recently opened to the outside. So for the last maybe 30 years. So prior to that, I don't know if they had any Moroccans ever show up or anybody of darker skin tone. And so you could definitely tell that people, especially older people who, lived most of their life before the wall came down, were just, openly surprised to see us walking down the street speaking English.
Yeah. And I just bring that up because, just as a person of color, I feel like it is a disservice if you just say like, you know what, I just want to like travel the world and not have to take into consideration that there are some places that are more accepting than other places. And that could be a consideration in where you decide to reside. And from what I understand, Portugal is just a super diverse and welcoming place in general. And so I don't think that that's by coincidence that you guys ended up there and feel so comfortable there and decided that that was a place that you are currently residing for a longer term.
Oh, definitely. So Portugal definitely is like, I mean, I'm sure as you've heard and as so many people have said, very open to foreigners, just like a much more open and accepting society, and a place where we just feel very comfortable here. Nobody ever stares at us. It's actually really common to see people of all skin tones on the street. And my kids fit right in. Like, we're just very comfortable here. And that's definitely part of the reason why we decided to stay here longer.
I love it. I love it. So I think this is a great place to wrap things up. But I want you to be able to share a lot of the resources that have helped you on your journey on both financial independence, on travel hacking, and your world school and just your research that you use while traveling abroad.
Let's see. So like I mentioned, there's a ton of different Facebook groups that can be super helpful, whether it's the World Schoolers group, We Are World Schoolers, the family travel groups, Our Tribe Travels, all of these different groups. There's also various expat groups. So if you're specifically interested in a country like Spain, Portugal, any country is going to have groups specifically for foreigners that are living there, usually like expats of Portugal or American expats in Portugal or in Spain or in Croatia, wherever you want to go, there's groups like this. And those are great groups to join to sort of get a feel of what it's like to live there. That's where people will talk about like finding housing or where to get your electricity hooked up or, how to deal with taxes and things like that. So if you're really thinking of spending more time somewhere, those are great sources of information. And then in terms of homeschooling while you're traveling, there's a ton of different resources online. Again, Facebook groups specific to homeschooling and the World Schooler ones, very useful. Different curriculums that you can see, just a couple to throw out there are Time for Learning. There's one called MobyMax that's very popular. And then there's a ton of other resources like brainpop.com or getepic.com where you can access books while you're traveling or just have like short, just media on different topics for your kids to watch and learn about.
Some travel hacking groups. Oh, also there's the CoastFi expat group too.
Yes, the CoastFi expat group is a great, if you're in the financial independence, retire early community, that's definitely a great group. And then travel hacking, there's like Travel Miles 101, I think it's called, is another Facebook group. And they have a course that teaches you sort of the basics of travel hacking. It's free. It's a great place to start and then take it from there. Some people become experts at this. You don't really have to be like a super expert to be able to benefit a lot. So yes. Don't get overwhelmed.
And also, disclaimer for travel hacking, you should be in a place where you're more financially stable to do that kind of thing, because if you're not,
definitely, you should be able to pay your credit cards off every month. Like, don't keep a balance if you've got debt on your credit cards. Like, the whole getting points thing doesn't make any sense because it's going to be negated by all the interest that you're paying.
And then, Vicki, if people want to stay in contact with you, how can they find you?
So we have a kind of a baby website that we're still building called, it's www.onewayticketfamily.com. And then I'm also on Instagram under the same handle, so under One Way Ticket Family, if you want to follow some of our pictures from our travels.
I love following your pictures, especially all the parks. Oh my God, the parks across the world. I'm just so jelly. You know what our parks look like in Oakland.
Yeah.
You know what our parks look like in Oakland, girl, and there's the struggle. So I'm just...
I do only post honestly, to keep it real, I should probably post some of the other parks we go to and you'd be like, oh yeah, there's some crappy parks around the world too.
Just like anything else. So right. Is there anything else you want to share, Vicki, to just encourage nurses on the path of financial independence or people who want to travel the world? Any like last words of wisdom?
I would just say go for it. Just, brainstorm, like think outside the box, see if there's any way that your job can make it happen, whether it's working per diem, whether it's working part-time, or even taking a leave of absence. Some jobs will allow you to take a leave of absence for, a couple of months, even 6 months. And that's a perfect amount of time. You don't need to travel indefinitely. If you want to really get out there, just going away even for a month or 2 or 3, whatever amount of time you have.
I love it, Vicki. Thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this conversation for so long, and it did not disappoint. I am looking forward to seeing your family grow abroad and see all your pictures and your travels. But most of all, I just want to thank you for taking the time to share with me and to share with the Nurses on Fire community. So thank you so much. I hope that episode with Vicki gave you some insight on what it's like to live abroad and explore the world with your family and not be quite retired, but still living your best life.
Lesson number 1.
Be willing to think outside the box. Even though Vicki hadn't attained full financial independence, she is not confined to the 2 weeks per year vacations or limited travel due to having kids. The world is her children's classroom, and she now spends more time than ever with her family.
Lesson number 2.
Use social media for educational and inspirational resources. Vicki has been able to find countless resources to help with her kids' homeschooling, for world schooling groups, and for the expat groups of the countries that she was traveling.
Lesson number 3.
What's holding you back from living your best life now and waiting until retirement? Find a happy medium. By leveraging her high Bay Area nursing income, Vicki has been able to work just a few days a month and enjoy time with her family exploring the world. Start exploring some ways you can start taking some mini vacations, which can lead you on the path to what you want to do in early retirement and beyond. You've been listening to Nurses on Fire. If you want to learn more about me or my guests, check out our show notes page. If you found value, please support our show by supporting our sponsors and affiliates also listed in the show notes. If you like what you're hearing, we'd love for you to give us a 5-star rating and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Google, or whatever podcast app you're using to stream this show. You guys, tell all the nurses in your life to subscribe. And if you know a nurse with a compelling money story and would like me to feature them, shoot me an email at Naseema@financiallyintentional.com. All right, y'all. Much love and keep them fires blazing.
Thank you for listening to my mommy's podcast. Don't forget to subscribe. Bye-bye.